Tom, we are at the should there be a public inquiry or shouldn't there be a public inquiry, or should there be? Well, depending on who you talk to, and that includes members of his own government, there should be. But according to the Prime Minister, I'd like you to hear this exchange with a pretty direct question and a more typical Justin Trudeau answer. Brian?
Calls are growing for a nonpartisan public inquiry into China's attempts to interfere with our elections. You used to call yourself transparent by default. Why are you so resistant to calling such an inquiry? And are you at all open to the idea now of holding a public inquiry into this very important issue for Canadians?
It's a really important and great thing that Canadians are so interested in ensuring that our principles of democracy and our practice of democracy continues to be protected from the ongoing interference as attempted by authoritarian governments around the world, whether it be China or other countries like it. But you're absolutely right. The Canadians do want to hear directly from independent experts on the safety, the stability, the security of our elections and of our democratic processes, despite the ongoing attempts at interference. That's why this week, at a parliamentary committee in public hearings, our National Security and Intelligence Advisor will be testifying on what is going on and what happened and what further methods are going to be taken. It is extremely important, as you say, that Canadians see that this is open, transparent, nonpartisan, independent, because we're all concerned and worried about our elections' integrity.
Ugh.
Keep searching for an answer in there. You'd have to look for a while.
Did I hear Natasha say
Sorry.
She just smacked her palm into her forehead.
But Tom, earlier we were just talking about the tone that he so often strikes. You know, in a moment we'll talk about the heckling, and that tone was great. Yes. But usually that teacher tone, you know, I'm just like, oh.
Yes. Tim Powers, whom I work with on Vashi's panel show, had a very colorful way of saying what type of nausea that brought on when he tries to use that tone. Look, that's proof of that old, that old theorem that the truth of a statement is inversely proportional to its length. That was just absolute, pure 100% BS. That was pure Trudeau. And it's unbelievable that he would be pulling a stunt like that on a day like today, because we saw over the weekend how much trouble Poilievre got himself into by trying to be cute and having several of his MPs meet with a neo-fascist politician from Europe. And you've got to be clear on these things. With regard to having an actual inquiry, it's not by sending in somebody who's under him on the totem pole to talk to them that people are going to be satisfied. Trudeau went to Bali in Indonesia. He met with President Xi. His people boasted that he had given Xi a reading of the Riot Act for interfering in our elections. That was in November. When Trudeau got back to Canada and went back to question period just before Christmas, he got questions. So what type of interference? And the answer was exactly like we just heard, 5 minutes of malarkey. So he's been pushed and pushed and pushed. And now what's happening is his one friend who was left, Jagmeet Singh, today decided he's not going to help him hide anymore, because Singh last week, the NDP, much to my surprise, helped Trudeau by saying, no, we don't need an inquiry, and they voted with the Liberals to block the motions in parliamentary committee. Now it looks like we're going to get finally a real analysis of this. Why is Trudeau hiding the truth? Well, Trudeau's hiding the truth because it's going to hurt him, because some of the interference by the Chinese absolutely helped the Liberals. That much has been established so far. And yes, it's very clear that the people around Trudeau and Trudeau himself were very much aware of Chinese interference in our last election. How do we know that? Because somebody at CSIS was good enough to show Bob Fife and others at the Globe and Mail the documents that prove that they have been given that information. So they've been trying to hide that too. Now, is it fair and is it good that CSIS or somebody at CSIS leaked that? The answer is no. It shouldn't happen because they're supposed to be keeping a secret. But it's an indication of the level of frustration they had with what we just listened to from Trudeau. Trudeau trying to skate around it, thinking he's more clever than everybody else in the room, that he's going to somehow snow everyone into believing nothing happened when it's clear as a bell something did happen. Canadians want to know. Canadians actually do care, because it is the backbone of our democracy, the integrity of our elections. And Trudeau, despite all of what we just heard, is the one who's hiding the real information about Chinese interference, and Canadians do have a right to know.
Okay, that was Trudeau on that. I love the fact that in that comment, Tom, he says, you're right, Canadians do have a right to know, and we are, and then says, based on that right to know, though, it's already being handled. There's something going on. You don't need to bother with this.
Yeah, and that something is absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
It's one of his, it's somebody who's under him on the masthead of the government coming in. And you think they're going to contradict anything that Trudeau's already said publicly? Come on, it's not going to work that way. The only way to get to the bottom of this, do you remember when Jean Charest fought tooth and nail to block a commission of inquiry into corruption in the Quebec construction industry?
And how bad it
He
looked.
finally named France Charbonneau, but he wouldn't even give her full powers of inquiry. She wrote a very damning letter saying, well, look, this is the rule of law. If you want an inquiry, you've got to give me full powers. And they had no choice but to give her full powers. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah.
It was all laid out in the public sphere, exactly the type of corruption and collusion that was going on. And this is what's needed here. We have to know what Trudeau knew, when he knew it, and what was actually given to the federal government by CSIS and other authorities who knew that the Chinese were helping people get elected if they thought they could help the Chinese, and helping defeat candidates that they didn't consider friendly to them. That much has been established. What is interesting is Trudeau continues to claim that he can affirm that the result of the election wasn't affected when nobody studied that. So how can he possibly make that statement?
Oh, my. Well, look, we started the second part of the show today by asking about what happened, the heckler, of course, that he confronted at the rally for Ukraine. I'm curious to get your opinion on that.
I think that's Trudeau at his best.
Yes.
If the baloney that we just listened to at the beginning of this discussion is Trudeau at his worst, Trudeau standing up to that heckler, the high-sounding Trudeau there to show Canada's real, genuine concern and support for Ukraine against the illegal Russian war that's being persecuted against them, all of the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, the genocide that's being perpetrated by Russia. Trudeau standing up to that, and then all of a sudden he's got a freedom convoy type who makes his way into the crowd and thinks he's going to heckle Trudeau. Trudeau was waiting for him, and it's ultimate proof that hecklers rarely win in these things, because Trudeau was just able to look at him and say, hey, sir, this is not your evening. This is an evening for the Ukrainian population here, people who are showing support for Ukraine. It's not your evening. The guy kept trying to scream at Trudeau, and he looked like a complete fool by the end of the exchange.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like I said, as much as I can't stand that teacherly tone, the tone that he struck in that moment to me was absolutely perfect. Yeah, he needed to be angry. He needed to put the guy in his place. Now, I want to seize upon what you said about that he was waiting for him. So tell us a little bit about, there's got to be prep, right, done before an event like this? Okay.
And by the way, that's one of the things that Trudeau masters. When he goes into a debate, he doesn't have to worry about inventing things or reacting spontaneously. He's very good. He was an actor, and he actually taught drama, and he is very good at memorizing his lines. So when stuff is given to him, he might make variations on it. But this type of thing, there was a similar one when he actually knew somebody who was going to be coming in. He talked to her about racism. It was here in Quebec, and it was a total put down. It was during the pandemic, and it's the same sort of thing. He knew exactly who she was, by the way. So it wasn't, the people around him said, well, we've got so-and-so, and she's in the crowd, and she's going to be doing this. So he has even more time to prepare specifically for that one. Last night's, would he have been given information that there was somebody there? Look, there's a lot of RCMP and a lot of local police when the Prime Minister moves around. They probably had enough information. Look, you might get heckled. And the best people around him who are great at communications would have said, stay high road, concentrate on the evening being for Ukrainians. Don't give the guy any oxygen. Don't give him a chance to come back. And, if they had grabbed him and hustled him out of there, which they could have done, then the heckler would have won.
Mm-hmm.
But Trudeau keeping him there and nailing him, Trudeau comes out the winner.
A lot of listeners thought it was a plant.
Well, it would have been easy to prove if it was. And this is the new world that we live in. Everything is presumed to be a conspiracy. The people who take care of these things are smart, but they don't have that much time to spend on this stuff. And it would be, on a simpler level, a real chance of getting caught if it was a plant. And I don't think that anybody would be that dumb.
So you're not surprised then by the level of cynicism as soon as something like this happens. This is the world now, right? Everything
Nobody
is
believes
a conspiracy.
anything anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a post-truth era where everybody has access to social media. Everybody gets to react to things and make their own stuff up. So in the past, we had arbiters of this place. Edward R. Murrow would go on the news and start beating up on Senator McCarthy, and then people would say, well, that's interesting, I'm with this guy. So you had people who would take on these big issues and explain them and relay them through channels that were, mainstream media. But now everybody's their own mainstream media, or as Andrew Warhol once said, everybody's going to be famous for 15 minutes. And sometimes, people hit it out of the ballpark just by being themselves, and they have something that goes viral. Most of the time, it's just cuckoo stuff. And, it's very hard to separate the wheat from that chaff.